They tell you the names of the tyrants, the conquerors, the generals. They tell you of wars and empires built on blood and steel. But history is not merely a record of men. It is a theft, a relentless erasure. Every great civilization has a shadow, a truth they tried to bury in the desert sand. Tonight we speak of a name that whispers from the deepest tombs of Egypt. A name so potent it terrified 3 empires, a goddess. So powerful her memory had to be shattered, and her essence scattered across 1,000 faiths. She was the architect of creation, the weaver of destiny, the ultimate mother. But her true story was too dangerous to be allowed to live. They called her Isis, and this is the silence that follows her scream. The very air of ancient Kemet, the Black Land, was once breathed by her. Before the pyramids stood fully formed, before the pharaohs wore their crowns of gold, Isis was the whisper of life along the Nile mud, the promise of harvest in the silt. She was not merely a goddess, she was the divine blueprint, the intelligent force that brought order from the chaos of the primeval waters of Nun. They called her Aset, a name meaning the throne, because it was from her that the very authority of the king was derived. The power to rule the world was literally channeled through her being. Think of it not as a queen supporting a king, but as the foundation of reality, giving rise to the structure of governance. She was the one who was, and the one who will be. Her lineage was cosmic, born of the earth god Geb and the sky goddess Nut, placing her at the nexus of the physical and celestial realms. Her brother husband was Osiris, the god of resurrection and fertility, the gentle ruler of the green earth. Their union was the sacred marriage, the hieros gamos, which regenerated the world each year, a perfect balance of male and female energy necessary for existence itself. This was the Golden Age, a time when gods walked among men and the secrets of magic were not hidden but openly taught. And at the heart of that magic was Isis. She was the great sorceress, the one who knew the names of all things. In the pantheon of Egyptian deities, a god's power was often tied to the possession of the secret name of another god. To know this name was to hold dominion over them, to control their very essence. The sun god Ra was the most supreme, the creator whose true name was guarded with obsessive jealousy, a word of limitless power. Yet even Ra, the self-created, was vulnerable to the cunning and wisdom of Isis. The ancient texts tell the harrowing story of her ambition, not born of malice, but of necessity. She desired the ultimate knowledge, the power to protect her family and her world, a power she knew could only be unlocked by knowing Ra's true name. She devised a plot chilling in its ingenuity. She gathered the spittle of the aging sun god, mixed it with earth, and from that unholy concoction formed a poisonous serpent. This venomous creature was placed upon Ra's daily path, biting him and injecting unimaginable agony into the very source of light. Ra suffered grievously, his cries echoing across the cosmos. None of the other gods could heal him, for the magic was unique, the poison too potent. It was then that Isis appeared, her eyes holding a frightening blend of compassion and calculated power. She offered to heal him, to draw the venom from his failing body, but on one absolute condition: he had to surrender his secret name. Imagine the scene: the creator of the universe laid low by the ambition of his own creation. Under duress, under the threat of unending suffering, Ra finally relented and whispered the sacred, unutterable name into the ear of Isis. In that single moment, the balance of power shifted forever. Isis became Rekat, the knowledgeable one, the mistress of all spells. She healed the sun god, but she did not forget the name. She kept it in the deepest vault of her heart, in the hidden place between the worlds, and thus she transcended her divine station. She was now the greatest magician in all creation, the one who held the key to ultimate reality. This act of profound, almost ruthless intellect is the core of her identity. She was not a passive nurturer, but an active force of will, capable of bending reality to her purpose. But that purpose was soon tested by the darkest betrayal. The jealousy of her brother set a primordial force of chaos and desert storms, festered into murderous rage against the prosperity and order represented by Osiris and Isis. Set longed for the throne, the undisputed dominion over Egypt. His plan was an act of pure theatrical cruelty, a twisted piece of performance art designed to humiliate and destroy. At a great banquet, he presented a magnificent chest, a beautiful sarcophagus crafted exactly to the dimensions of Osiris's body. He offered it as a prize to anyone who could fit inside. One by one, the guests tried and failed, until finally Osiris was persuaded to lie within it. The moment Osiris was enclosed, Set's conspirators slammed the lid shut, sealing it with molten lead, turning the beautiful box into a coffin. The god of life was entombed alive, and the chest was cast into the Nile. The waters that had brought life under Osiris's reign now became the vehicle of his death. The light of Egypt went out. The despair that followed was universal, a cosmic grief that threatened to return the world to none's formless void. But in this moment of utter desolation, Isis did not break. She became the paradigm of wifely devotion and relentless pursuit. Her grief did not paralyze her, it fueled her, turning her into a seeker, a detective, a solitary figure wandering the length of the land, searching for the lost body of her husband. She questioned everyone she followed, every rumor, every faint sign, until she discovered that the sarcophagus had drifted across the Mediterranean to the city of Byblos, becoming miraculously embedded in a great tamarisk tree. The king of Byblos, astonished by the tree's beauty, had cut it down and used the fragrant wood as a pillar in his palace, entirely unaware that the corpse of a god lay hidden within. Isis arrived in Byblos disguised as an elderly woman, a humble servant ministering to the children of the palace. With her innate grace and persuasive magic, she eventually revealed her true identity and her sorrow. The king, realizing the sacredness of the object he possessed, readily gave her the column. With her powers, she freed the coffin and returned to Egypt, her prize clutched to her chest, the promise of resurrection finally within her grasp. The journey had been arduous, the sorrow immense, but she held the physical key to the restoration of the world. Yet even the gods are rarely granted a moment of peace. Isis had brought the body of Osiris back to the swampy isolation of the Nile Delta, a place she hoped was safe enough for the delicate ritual of restoration. She used her magic to protect the remains and began preparing the spells that would reanimate her love, the most powerful necromantic rite ever attempted. But the darkness was not yet satisfied. Set, ever vigilant, ever consumed by his destructive jealousy, discovered where Isis had hidden the sarcophagus. His rage was not just about the throne, it was about extinguishing hope itself, the very possibility of order returning. He could not merely kill Osiris once more, he had to destroy the concept of the god entirely. In an act of unparalleled desecration, Set tore the body of Osiris into 14 separate pieces. These fragments of the god of life were then scattered across the entire expanse of Egypt, from the delta to the southern deserts, each piece hidden in a different nome or province. This was a calculated strategic move, the complete physical dissolution of the divine sovereign, designed to make his resurrection impossible, to ensure that not a single cult center could ever claim the full presence of the god. The crime was now not just murder, it was fragmentation, the literal scattering of the divine essence. The grief of Isis now transcended mere sorrow. It became a cosmic pilgrimage, a terrifying odyssey across the land. She transformed herself into a kite, a swift-winged falcon soaring over the dusty plains and barren rock faces. She became the bird of prey, the hunter, the relentless seeker. The ancient Greeks later named this bird the ibis, a symbol forever tied to her quest. She was no longer just the throne, she was the widow, the embodiment of loss, and the tireless pursuit of redemption. One by one, she located the scattered remains. In each nome, she found a fragment of bone or flesh, and there she instituted a shrine, a place of worship and mourning, guaranteeing that even in pieces, Osiris would be revered. This act is the mythical origin of the Egyptian temple system, the reason every major city had its own cult center, dedicated to a small part of the great myth. But one piece remained missing, one critical fragment that Set had thrown into the Nile. It was the phallus, the source of generative power of the god's fertility. The myth tells us that this piece was consumed by a specific kind of Nile fish, the oxyrhynchus, thereby making the natural rejoining of the body impossible. This was the final hurdle, the most devastating challenge to her ultimate purpose. But Isis possessed the secrets of the sun god's name. She was the mistress of magic and the mistress of creative will. Where physical restoration failed, she turned to transcendental creation. She fashioned a replacement for the missing piece out of gold or clay or powerful magic. And then, with the help of her sister Nephthys and the jackal god Anubis, the first embalmer, she reassembled the divine body. This was the first mummification, the foundation of Egyptian funerary rites, and the promise of eternal life for every soul who followed. The ritual was complete, but life had not yet returned. And here the story reaches its absolute emotional and magical zenith. To conceive the heir that would avenge his father and restore order, Isis performed a miraculous act. She hovered over the reassembled body of Osiris, her wings beating slowly, her magic swirling around the lifeless form. This was the Immaculate Conception, thousands of years before the concept found its way into other religions. She breathed life, fire, and light into the corpse, just enough to receive the divine seed. From this union of the living goddess and the dead but resurrected god came the child who would be known as Horus, the falcon god, the golden heir, the divine avenger. Isis had ensured not only the survival of her love's essence, but the continuation of the legitimate lineage of the sun, god Ra, upon the earth. She had wrestled control from death itself, but a child born of such desperate magic was in constant danger. Set was still the tyrannical ruler, and the infant Horus was a threat to his absolute power. Isis became the protector of the weak, the ultimate refugee mother. She fled to the desolate marshes of Chemis in the delta, concealing Horus among the papyrus reeds and the tall grasses. She lived in constant fear, a goddess stripped of her power and forced into hiding, protecting the future of the world in the most vulnerable form imaginable, a small child. During this period of exile, she endured every fear and sorrow known to a mortal mother. She was forced to beg for food, to live among snakes and scorpions, and the ever-present danger of Set's agents. One day, while she was out seeking sustenance, the young Horus was bitten by a poisonous serpent, a terrible irony given her own use of a serpent against Ra. She returned to find her son rigid and cold, apparently dead. The cries of Isis were so overwhelming, so filled with the despair of the universe, that they pierced the heavens. They halted the bark of Ra, the sunboat, in its path. The sun stopped moving in the sky. The day froze in time because of the magnitude of her maternal agony. The gods could not ignore her suffering. Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic, descended to the marshlands, and using the powerful magic that Isis herself had mastered, he healed Horus, returning the child to life. This pivotal myth cements her role not just as a cosmic force, but as a compassionate intervener. She is the mother who suffers, the mother who saves, the ultimate champion of the weak and the marginalized. Her compassion was now intrinsically linked to her power. She taught Horus magic, she raised him in secret, preparing him for the ultimate conflict, a generational battle to reclaim the throne. The eventual confrontation between Horus and Set was the epic final drama of Egyptian mythology. It was a vicious, protracted series of magical duels and physical contests, a conflict often arbitrated by the assembled council of the gods. And in every moment of the trial, Isis was the unseen guide, the strategic mastermind. She used her knowledge of Ra's secret name and her unparalleled magical skill to aid her son, often intervening directly to protect him from Set's savage attacks. The story of Isis should have ended with the victory of Horus, a peaceful return to the Egyptian order. But a force more powerful than any desert god began to move, a human force driven by trade, conquest, and curiosity. As the pharaonic era waned, the borders of Kemet became porous, the secrets of the Nile began to spill out into the Mediterranean world. And the first secret to escape the temples was the irresistible magnetism of the mother goddess. Her appeal was immediate and universal. Greek merchants traveling up the Nile saw in her powerful narrative echoes of their own myths. In her devotion, they saw Demeter, the searching mother of Persephone. In her magical power, they saw Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft and the crossroads. They began to absorb her into their own pantheon, giving her Greek names and erecting shrines in port cities like Alexandria, the cultural nexus of the ancient world. The Hellenistic period following Alexander the Great's conquests saw the first great cultural transformation of Isis. She became Isis Sotera, Isis the Savior. She was no longer confined to the Egyptian myth cycle, but became a global goddess, a cosmopolitan deity whose power transcended nationality. Her temples were built not just in Egypt, but on the islands of the Aegean, throughout the Greek mainland, and along the coasts of Asia Minor. She became syncretized, merged with the local goddesses of every place she touched. This was not appropriation in the modern sense, but assimilation, the ancient world's attempt to find a singular truth in a multiplicity of names. But the real explosion of her influence came with the rise of the Roman Empire. The rigid, practical Romans were initially suspicious of the ecstatic, emotional Eastern cults, but they were fundamentally drawn to two things Isis offered that their own gods lacked: personal salvation and a relationship with the divine feminine. The Roman state religion was a contract, a formal exchange of sacrifice for protection. It was cold, functional, and offered little comfort for the suffering individual. The cult of Isis, however, offered an intimate spiritual experience, a promise of life after death, based not just on status, but on initiation and personal devotion. This was revolutionary. Her temples flourished in every major city of the empire, from the bustling port of Ostia to the capital of Rome itself. She was worshipped on the island of Delos, in the heart of the Mediterranean, and her statues were carried by legionaries to the frontiers of the empire, even into Britain. She was given 1,000 titles: Regina Coeli, Queen of Heaven; Stella Maris, Star of the Sea; Inventrix, the Discoverer. She became the all-encompassing deity, the summation of all goddesses. Her worshippers would chant her litany, calling her by every name known to man and woman, celebrating her as the one great power behind all existence. Her iconography morphed. The traditional Egyptian symbols, the throne hieroglyph, the solar disk, and cow horns were often softened, blended with Greek robes and Roman marble. She held the sistrum, a sacred rattle that symbolized the shaking and ordering of the cosmos. She held the bucket, the situla, containing the sacred water of the Nile, symbolizing life and purification. But the essence of her power remained the same. She was the power that could conquer death and chaos. The mystery cult surrounding her became immensely popular, a secret society offering profound spiritual rites. Initiates underwent rigorous purification rituals, fasting and cleansing, before being led into the darkest chambers of the temple. There they were said to experience a form of ritual death and resurrection, a psychological journey mimicking the death of Osiris and the rebirth of Horus. They emerged transformed, bound to her by a sacred oath, and convinced of their own eternal life. The promise was simple, yet irresistible: follow Isis, and you will live forever. But this immense power attracted fear and suspicion from the established authorities. The Roman Senate repeatedly attempted to suppress the cult, seeing it as a moral danger, a foreign subversive element that undermined traditional Roman values. They passed decrees banning her worship. They tore down her altars. One famous incident records the destruction of her shrine on the Capitoline Hill, only for it to be rebuilt by the fervent devotion of her followers almost immediately. The power of the people's faith was simply too great for the Senate's laws to contain. The political persecution only strengthened the cult's resilience, driving it deeper into the hearts of the populace. Women in particular gravitated to her because in a patriarchal Roman society, she offered an image of divine authority and unbridled power that resonated deeply. She was a mother, a wife, a ruler, a sorceress, and a judge. She was everything. She was the one true goddess who had done the impossible. However, as the cult expanded, its mythology became simplified, its origin story smoothed out for mass appeal. The gritty political and magical complexities of the Egyptian original were often forgotten or obscured. The dark truths of Ra's coercion of Osiris's dismemberment and of her own ruthless ambition were replaced by a more palatable image of pure benevolent motherhood, a kind, forgiving heavenly figure. The complex, powerful magician was slowly being rewritten into the gentle Virgin Mother. As the Roman Empire entered its twilight years, a new and relentless force emerged from the East, a monotheistic faith that would brook no rivals. Christianity. For centuries, the cult of Isis had enjoyed a privileged position, a vast and enduring network of temples and devotees that spanned the known world. She was the one true universal deity recognized by merchant soldiers, slaves, and emperors alike. But the arrival of the Christian faith marked the beginning of a direct zero-sum competition for the very soul of the empire. The conflict was brutal, not always physical, but always existential. The central tenets of Isis's myth, the miraculous birth, the death and resurrection of the divine spouse, and the promise of eternal life were terrifyingly similar to the emerging Christian narrative. This similarity was not an accident of history, but a strategic overlap. New religions often incorporate and subsume the popular symbols and stories of the faiths they seek to replace. The Christians understood that to win the hearts of the common people, they had to offer an alternative that felt familiar, yet superior. The Virgin Mother was the primary battleground. For centuries, Roman citizens had prayed to Isis as the great Queen of Heaven, Regina Coeli, whose maternal care extended over all life. They saw her nursing the infant Horus, a divine child born of a miraculous conception. The imagery was everywhere. Isis was often depicted sitting on a throne holding her son, the image of maternal power and divine authority. When the veneration of Mary, the mother of Jesus, began to grow, Christians had a ready-made cultural template to adopt. The titles of Isis began to be seamlessly transferred to Mary. She became the new Stella Maris, Star of the Sea, a title previously ascribed to Isis because of her protection of sailors and her association with the maritime season. She became the new Queen of Heaven. The very emotional resonance, the deep psychological comfort that came from worshipping a powerful, compassionate female deity was simply moved from the Egyptian goddess to the Christian Mother of God. This process of transformation was the most profound theft of identity in religious history, a systematic assimilation designed to dismantle the power of the original. But the Christian fathers did not stop at assimilation. When they gained political power, especially after Emperor Theodosius I declared Christianity the state religion in 380 CE, the systematic suppression began in earnest. The beautiful, powerful narratives of Isis were not merely reinterpreted, they were actively demonized. Her magic was declared black witchcraft, her rites were deemed orgies, and her followers were persecuted as heretics and idolaters. The temples of Isis, some of the most spectacular buildings of the ancient world, were targeted for destruction. They were looted, burned, or most insidiously, converted directly into churches. The foundation of the Temple of Isis in Rome, for example, was later built over by Christian structures, a symbolic victory of the new faith, literally standing on the bones of the old. The great centers of her cult, like the Temple of Philae in Egypt, which had survived numerous invasions and changes in power, were finally closed by imperial decree. The final blow to the Egyptian heartland of her worship came in 550 CE under the Byzantine Emperor Justinian, a moment that marked the conclusive end of 3,000 years of continuous, unbroken devotion to an Egyptian deity. Her identity as the supreme sorceress, the one who knew the secret name of Ra, was not forgotten, but recast into a negative light. The Christian narrative needed a clear division between divine good and worldly evil. All pagan magic, all ancient wisdom that did not originate from the Judeo-Christian tradition was relegated to the domain of demons. Isis, the powerful magician, became a dangerous, seductive witch, the ultimate temptress, whose knowledge was a curse, not a blessing. Think of the emotional and societal impact of this transition. For centuries, the most powerful being in the universe was a woman, a seeker, a compassionate mother who ruled over life, death, and magic. Suddenly she was outlawed, her image shattered, her temples silent. The feminine principle of ultimate cosmic power was violently stripped away, leaving a void that was filled by a relentlessly male hierarchy: God the Father, God the Son, and the male priesthood. Yet history is rarely a clean sweep. The memory of Isis persisted in the shadows, in the hidden currents of culture. The traditions of her mystery cult, the practice of initiation, the emphasis on spiritual rebirth, and the use of sacred water and symbols lived on, transmuted into early Christian liturgy and folk practices. Even the distinctive knotted veil that covered the heads of her priestesses sometimes subtly appeared in the iconography of nuns and religious women, a faint echo of the great Egyptian queen. The deliberate rewriting of Isis achieved its goal. By the Middle Ages, the common European person would have no idea that the Queen of Heaven they prayed to had once been the greatest magician in the history of Egypt, a goddess who outwitted the sun itself and reassembled her murdered husband. She was successfully neutralized, her complex, fierce, and empowering narrative reduced to a historical footnote or a target of theological scorn. Her greatest power was her knowledge, and that knowledge was stolen and sealed away. The theft was complete, but the silence that followed was merely the cessation of public worship, not the end of her influence. Isis did not simply vanish when the last of her temples was sealed. Her essence, the memory of her power, became a haunting, pervasive echo in the West's collective psyche, a ghost in the machine of history. Her enduring legacy is not found only in the appropriation of her image as the Virgin Mother, but in the deeper currents of forbidden knowledge and mystical pursuit. The traditions of her magical arts, the pursuit of gnosis, the secret knowledge that liberates the soul, found their way into the esoteric underground. Alchemists and early occultists of the Renaissance, whispering of Hermetic wisdom, looked back to Egypt, to Thoth, and to Isis, the supreme magician, as the ultimate source of their power. She became the veiled figure of esoteric mystery. The Isis unveiled a goddess whose ultimate truths were too sacred to be shown to the uninitiated mob. This new role as the hidden source of ancient magic kept her story alive in the shadows long after the bishops had decreed her dead. Her name itself became a cipher, a symbol for the relentless pursuit of hidden reality. The great statue of the goddess in size bore the inscription that terrified every seeker: "I am all that has been and is and shall be, and my veil no mortal has hitherto lifted." This inscription became the motto for secret societies and philosophical quests for millennia, a challenge to humanity to seek the truth behind the illusion. And so we arrive at the profound and troubling conclusion of her story, the narrative that history desperately tried to silence. Isis was not just a symbol of fertility or a grieving wife. She was the divine embodiment of female agency, operating on a cosmic scale. She achieved ultimate power not through brute force or inherited status, but through intellect, cunning, and unwavering will. She defeated the sun god by outwitting him. She defeated death by inventing the concept of resurrection and immortality. She defeated chaos by giving birth to the rightful king. She was the ultimate maker and shaper, and that is why she had to be destroyed. History as written by men is often an endless narrative of power being seized and held by the male principle. The very existence of a female deity who held the ultimate secrets of the universe, who governed the fundamental laws of life and death, represented a direct existential threat to every subsequent patriarchal religion and empire. Her narrative had to be stolen, fragmented, and recast, because the full truth of Isis was too empowering, too disruptive to the structures of male authority that sought to dominate the post-pagan world. The Church and the Empire did not merely defeat the cult of Isis, they systematically dismantled the divine feminine's right to ultimate power. They took her gentle attributes, her maternal love, and gave them to a more subservient figure, Mary, a virgin mother who, though revered, remains perpetually subordinate to God the Father and God the Son. And they took her powerful, magical, and ruthless attributes, her intellect and her knowledge, and buried them deep under layers of superstition and demonization. The true cost of her suppression was not just the loss of a goddess, but the loss of a crucial spiritual counterbalance. The silencing of Isis left the West with a spiritual vacuum, an imbalance where the fierce, protective, nurturing, and magically autonomous power of the feminine principle was relegated to the shadows or stripped of its authority. The greatest crime was not the murder of Osiris, but the slow, deliberate erasure of the one who brought him back to life. Every time you see a dark, cloaked figure in a fictional narrative, every time you encounter the trope of the beautiful, dangerous witch, every time a mother figure is shown to possess a secret knowledge that guides the hero, you are witnessing a faint, corrupted echo of Isis. She is the archetype that simply refuses to die, the mother goddess, whose presence is still felt in the chill air of ancient temples and the deep current of human faith. Her temples are ruins now, the sistrum is silent, and the sacred Nile water no longer flows to her altars in Rome. Yet the profound questions she embodies remain. What is the ultimate source of power? Is it force or is it knowledge? And what price does humanity pay when it deliberately steals the light of wisdom and reconfigures truth to serve its own greed for power and control? The answers are still buried in the desert sand, waiting for the next seeker to uncover the scattered fragments of the mother goddess who knew too much. Her story is finished, but the history of the stolen gods is not. If you wish to uncover the secrets buried beneath time, subscribe. The next darkness awaits.